Welcome to the Inferno Cast. Today's guest is Roger Gracie's first black belt. He is also the founder of the Jiu-Jitsu Brotherhood. He's a published author, and now he's a transformational mentor. Please welcome Nicolas Gregoriades. How are you doing today?
Yeah, really well, Caleb. Really well. And yourself?
Oh man, I'm great. I'm just glad that we finally got to catch up. You know, we've been in communication for a few months now during the Corona mess and all that, and I'm just glad that you were able to make some time to talk about some jiu-jitsu and life today.
Yeah, for sure. I'm happy to be here, my brother.
Well, I wanted to get started kind of where it started. So you kind of come from a family of martial artists, and so I was going to just kind of discuss how you got into martial arts. Was it just kind of a natural thing you did as a kid because that's what dad was doing, or was there intrigue in the martial arts because of other influences or factors?
That's a good question. I think it probably was rooted in my dad being, he is a karate black belt. I mean, he doesn't train anymore, but I think that's what probably first got me inspired by the martial arts. And then it was, when you're a kid in the 80s, everything was about ninjas. I don't know how old you are, but back in the 80s, that was the thing. Is like, not only was eventually Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles came around, but before that there was this movie that I was obsessed with called American Ninja. It was so good.
Oh man, American Ninja 4, David Dudikoff, he's my guy.
Yeah. I didn't even know there was a 4. I've only seen up till 2.
Yeah.
I need to get back on it. Yeah. So I mean, like when I was a kid, my dad was a karate black belt, and he did some instructing a little bit, and then there's all this ninja stuff. And then at 7, so I was in grade 2. I wanted to do karate, but the only thing my school had as an after-curricular or extracurricular thing was judo. So I went and started training judo, which I really loved. I was pretty good at it, and I just enjoyed it. And that was it, dude. Like from that point on, martial arts were almost always in my life. There was a period when in my late teens where I kind of drifted away from it, but then I got back into it, and then it became my career. So martial arts have always been something that's been like very, very close to me,
Yeah. I mean, that's a familiar story. A lot of people were influenced, especially people around our age in the 80s. I actually just talked to Stephen K. Hayes, the first American Ninja, because I'd gotten one of his magazines when I was a kid. And so I brought him on, and, we talked last week and just had a good time, just because, he understands the ninja culture that existed within the media versus what he was like actually trying to do as a martial artist. But he's like, man, I wrote a bunch of books. They all sold. It went well. And he's like, I love martial arts. So he still trains, and it was a fun one. But
did he disappear in a puff of smoke afterwards?
Yeah, exactly. He was gone. Boom, done. But you mentioned that later teens or mid-teens taking a break. That seems to be pretty consistent with a lot of lifetime martial artists, where it was almost like a time of reflection or kind of redirection of values of like, did you kind of have some of those questions when that was happening?
Well, I just think at that age, you kind of get distracted by other things. Like for me, it was girls and video games. And also I started working out a lot, like lifting weights and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say I didn't have time, but my focus was on other things,
Yeah. Well, so how did you find your way into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I went to work. I finished high school, and I didn't go straight to college. I took a couple of years off, and I got a job working for an internet company. And my first boss was a guy named Duncan, and he was doing this thing which went by the name of Causation, right? Which was basically just this guy in Cape Town, where I was from. He was like one of the pioneers of the MMA scene in South Africa. So it was basically just submission grappling with a little bit of striking, a little bit of pancration style stuff built in. And Duncan was doing that at the time. He was one of the top students. And I mean, I was like looking for something to get back into. I'd done a little bit of boxing in the previous year, but I hadn't done judo or karate for a long time, and I wanted to get back into martial arts, right? And Duncan just seemed cool. He seemed like quite a solid dude, very centered, and my brother and I, one night, we went to go check it out. We went to go check out this Kaioken class. And I still remember the coach teaching the rear naked choke, Dakajime. And yeah, I mean, it was cool. I remember he put us to spar, and I strangled the first dude. I was like, and then I thought to myself, damn, this shit works. Like, and then I remember thinking as well, I could be pretty good at this, you know, if I'm already like able to strangle a dude who's been coming before. Like, and I remember like, because of judo, you know, like I was used to that feeling of tussling with someone and headlocking dudes and holding them down. And like, I wasn't a complete novice as a grappler. And so I had a kind of an affinity for it. So yeah, that was cool.
Well, so then you end up in London, you know, so it's like, I mean, you're in Cape Town. Was that due to employment? Was it due to chasing your dream? What were the influences that got you in England?
Well, so I continued doing this kayakan for a long time, and well, a few years, and I got pretty good. I was a pretty good, decent, like novice grappler. And then at 23, I'd finished college. And the thing about South Africa is that it's like, it's a beautiful place and it's a wonderful place, but it's very backward and it's very isolated. And man, I just wanted to go see the world. I just wanted to get out of there. And you know, I have a Greek passport because my dad is Greek. So that's an EU passport, and at the time England was part of the EU, so anyone from any European country could go there without a visa. And truth be told, Caleb, I didn't really, well, it's not that I didn't want to go to England, but it definitely wasn't my first choice. I would have come straight to the States, you know, where I live now. But you couldn't just do that, you know, especially back then. Well, I guess it's the same as it is now. You can't just arrive in the States and say, hey, I want to hang out, right? It doesn't work like that. So I went to London, and I obviously wanted to continue my training because I was, you know, it was a part of my life now. And a friend of mine who had been at Kaiokan with me in Cape Town, he had moved to London a couple of years before, and he had started training at Roger Gracie's place. And I said to him, where are you training? And he told me, and then I went to Roger's place and started training there, and that was it.
So when you were deciding to leave home, was that a scary, transformative situation, or was it like you had traveled before, wasn't that big of a deal?
No, it wasn't that big of a deal. You know, I've been fortunate enough to have been on some overseas trips during my childhood and my early teens with my dad and my family. And man, I got to be honest, I just want to get the fuck out of there. Like, it's just like, I want to go see the world. I want to go, like the way I've heard it described, like, you know, the masculine energy is like, he wants to penetrate the world, right? It's not just that he wants to penetrate women, he wants to go out and penetrate the world. And I just wanted to get out there and see the world and do stuff. And my mom said to me, when I was about to leave, she said, you just want to shake the dust of this place off your boots. And I was like, yeah, I kind of do. I didn't even, looking back, I realized that it was a bit arrogant and, you know, one of the follies of youth. And South Africa is an amazing place, and it did so many things for me. And I don't want to, I'm not bad mouthing it, but I think a lot of 18 or 19 or 21-year-olds in South Africa at this time probably feel the same way. It's like, it's cool, but you want to get out and see the world. Like when you're in a place like South Africa or Australia or, you know, I don't know, parts of the Middle East, I guess you could classify, or even places like New Zealand. What I've always felt when I'm in those places is that the world is happening somewhere else, right? And you're just stuck out there, separated by huge distance, but also by culture, right? And you know, all the movies and TV and music, they're coming from places like London and Los Angeles and New York and Paris. They're not coming from Cape Town, and they're not really coming much from other, like those isolated places. So you want to be where the stuff's happening, you know, you want to be where it's all taking place. So for me, it wasn't a big scary thing. It was, I mean, obviously, like, you know, leaving the family and stuff was, you know, makes you a little bit anxious, but I just knew I wasn't supposed to be there. I knew I was supposed to be in the world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's almost like a proximity breeds contempt. I mean, because there's a lot of young people that are in LA or New York, and they kind of feel the same way that you felt, where they need to get away or at least go explore. So, I mean, that's a pretty consistent, but at the same time, I can see exactly what you're saying, where those cultural distances can make it challenging because you don't feel as connected to, you know, what is happening in the world at times. You know, because a lot of people are going to Australia or New Zealand or South Africa on vacation. Like, it's almost like the escape thing. I mean, even for like Hawaii, you know, it's like you go to Hawaii to go on vacation, but sometimes people don't live there, and the people that do live there, they're coming to the States. So I just think sometimes maybe it's ingrained in us, especially at that age, you know, to be kind of transitive, to go explore, see what's out there. the grass is greener on the other side kind of syndrome. But that's healthy. I mean,
Familiarity, as you said, yeah, familiarity breeds contempt, right? Like it's very, very true. I mean, even someone said something to me based that comes back to the jiu-jitsu conversation is he said, you know, when I was training at Roger's place in London, he said, we just take it for granted because Roger's here and you live here, or we live here and we just can train with him every day. So you might not arrive, you might skip training one day, or, you know, whereas the people who are coming to visit just to train with him, you know, it's special for them. So they want to do it. Right. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Unless you're really on it and really actively trying to counter it, familiarity does breed contempt.
yeah, if you're not aware of it, you know, that, and which goes back to degrees of self-awareness that ties into jiu-jitsu. I mean, when you look at a new white belt, they don't realize that that grip is about to choke them. They don't realize that you're setting up the sweep. You know, they're so focused on what they're going to do or what they're trying to do that their perspective is a little bit narrow. And, you know, and as they expand and train, that perspective grows, which just like with us in the human experience does a lot of similar things where it's just trying to grow that viewpoint of the world. So when you were training with Roger, at what point did you kind of become aware that you were tapped into something unique and special that was like, man, this is a very unique experience that I get on a daily basis that maybe transitioned your value of that experience?
That's a great question. I mean, the first time I met him, you know, back then, look, you understand, you got to understand, I was 23. I was in amazing shape. I was probably, if not the best grappler in South Africa, one of the top 3 grapplers in South Africa. You know, and I could wrestle, dude. I could fight, you know, and I got there and I was like, I wanted to test myself. And I remember seeing him and I was like, this guy doesn't look that tough. Because he doesn't, you know, Roger's like a gentle, sure he's big and all, but he doesn't have like a mean mug looking face. And I asked him, like, can we spar? And I remember sparring with the dude. And I mean, to this day, no one has ever thrashed me ever like that guy's thrashed me. Yeah, I still remember going back there last year in the summer. This time, a lot had changed. You know, I'd been training for 20 years. I was a 3rd degree black belt under him. I now was bigger and heavier and stronger. You know, I kind of thought, okay, the gap's going to have narrowed a little bit, you know, and honestly, man, I'm a good jiu-jitsu player. I wouldn't say I'm great, but I'd say I'm a very, very good jiu-jitsu player. Not many people beat me up, right? Like it doesn't matter what level they are. I can hang with almost anyone. And he just crucified me. Man, I am not exaggerating when I tell you, he beat me up like I beat up a white belt. It was honestly embarrassing. It was good for me because I was like, whoa, okay, I forgot. Like there's levels to this. But I mean, that also happened to me the first time I trained with him. And I remember thinking to myself then, okay, well, there's definitely something to this. Like this guy knows what's going on because there's nothing I can do with him, right? You know, and that's when I realized, yeah, there's I wouldn't say I realized then that he was special, but I realized that there were levels. And then a couple of years in, when I was training him, he started winning everything, you know. And when he won ADCC, I think it was 2005. He won his weight in the absolute. I was like, wow, okay, this guy's the best grappler in the world. And I'm training here. And that's when it really sunk in, Caleb, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and sometimes when you look at just our personal journeys, when you start being able to appreciate, you know, the opportunities in front of you, it's almost like intentional training. It's kind of like when you see grapplers that go out and like, I just want to roll. I just want to roll. And the guys that go out and they're like, I want to do a specific drill, or I want to roll with a specific purpose, or just like working out lifting weights, you know, like your intentionality behind your action a lot of times can dictate the outcome in a much different way. Do you feel like that started to happen with you both on the mats and off the mats?
Yeah, so intention is something I'm very aware of and have become more aware of in the last couple of years. You know, I think it's very closely related to your interactions with people from both sides, you towards them and them towards you. You know, people can say a certain thing, but the content of the words doesn't really matter. It's the intention behind them. Like if you don't like someone and you say to them, wow, you're looking great today, bro. You know, like that intention is more important than, as I said, the content of the words. So
I think intention is absolutely vital if you want to be a fully self-actualized human being. It's one of the ingredients in alignment, you know. And for me, alignment is the big theme of my work. Is you have to become aligned with your actions, your thoughts, your intentions, your diet, your body. Everything has to be in alignment if you want to get the most out of the human experience. And as I said, intention being one of those things.
Yeah. I mean, it's like having congruency. It's almost like car parts, for a simple analogy of, there's a lot of different cars and different parts on different brands don't match. And you got to have some congruency of those brands for the car to run. So you talked about, you know, transformation. So, which that kind of takes me to my next question of the ayahuasca experience. So apparently, you know, years ago, you went to South America. And for people that aren't familiar, you know, like this is kind of a spiritual experience because it comes from a vine, right?
Yeah, it's two vines. One is called chacruna and one is called ayahuasca. There are some other vines or plants that are occasionally added in, depending on the guy who's brewing the mixture. But those are the two main ingredients.
So what happened for this experience? Because some people may have not be familiar with this, and some are. So how did you end up there? And then two, what transpired?
So I'd had ayahuasca once before in London. I'd had an experience in a very small group. It was me, the shaman, and one other person. We did a private ceremony, and it was interesting. It was a powerful experience. I wouldn't say it was profound, but it was definitely something happened right in my psyche, and I was like, wow, okay, there's something to this stuff. And then this thought just the only way I can describe it is this thought just started to consume me. I just kept having this thought: you've got to go to the Amazon and drink ayahuasca there. You got to go. You got to go. You got to go. And I couldn't sleep sometimes. I'd wake up and I just have this like incessant thought, like, you've got to go drink ayahuasca in the Amazon. You've got to go drink ayahuasca in the Amazon. And then it transpired that same shaman that had done the ceremony with me in London was organizing a retreat to Peru for the end of the Mayan calendar, December 2012, right? And I just thought, okay, well, this is it. This is the thing, you know? And the weird thing, I think on some level, we all have a deep instinct of what we need to do in life. You know, I think if you think of the concept of time, we're experiencing the present, but we can also access the future and the past if we know how to. And even if we don't know how to, sometimes they just kind of, they overlap within us. So I think we have access to all of them at the same time. And I just kept having this vision that I would go into the jungle. And I'd had this my whole life, actually. I had this vision that I'd go into a jungle somewhere and I'd come out and I'd have a beard. And when I had that beard, I'd be okay, right? Like at the end of that experience, I'd have fucking sorted my shit out, right? Like, so I made this agreement with myself. Okay, I'm going to be in the jungle for 12 days. I'm not going to shave, right? Because I wanted to make that vision come true. And you know, I went into Peru with this group of people, and we went and did 12 days of plant medicine, including ayahuasca and some others, and didn't shave, and had I think we drank ayahuasca 4 times over those 12 days, maybe 5 times, and each experience was fucking mind-blowing. There's no other way to put it. And the last one, which was on the end of the Mayan calendar, December 22nd, 2012, I often say I get these, I don't call them goosebumps anymore. I call them truth bumps. I get truth bumps whenever I talk about this. But, you know, that one experience, that was the night I was born. I say my life has 2 distinct chapters. The one is before that and the one is after that, right? Like it. And Caleb, if I tell you what, I can't even tell you what happened, because for most of it, I was in another place. Like I wasn't even, I mean, I can't even tell you what was going through my mind, because I'd gone beyond the mind. I'd gone to like it's very difficult to describe in words, but it gave me exactly what I needed. It gave me this experience. There's a gentleman called Gordon White he's a mysticist and how would you describe him? He's an esoteric sort of, I don't like to use the word magician because it's got a lot of negative connotations, but he's
very spiritual, switched on dude. And he says that you need to have an experience in life where you become invincible, right? And what he's talking about that is he's not talking about becoming invincible like a superhero with ultra hardened skin that can't be hurt. He just means you have an experience that is so profound and so beyond what our normal day-to-day life is, that you are forever after that changed and convinced that there's more to life than just this physical reality and this normal human experience, right? And that's when you're invincible, because you know, okay, when I die, there's more. It's not the end of it. There's more, right? And in your mind, that is a very powerful and freeing thing to happen. And for me, that experience in Peru was when I became invincible. You know, it really just.
Could you maybe consider it indomitable faith was part of that experience? Like, you know, because you kind of described like having this confidence or this perspective of, you know, what's beyond life, there's more out there, you know. Would it be something like that, or would it be more like a comprehension experience versus?
Okay. I just want to bring up this Bible verse because I think it'll things not yet seen. Yeah, I think it's Hebrews 11. Hold on. This will make sense of, or help me answer your question. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. That's Hebrews 11, verse 1. So this wasn't an act of faith because I saw these fucking things, bro. I didn't need faith anymore. I was like, whoa, like this is, I mean, it's here. I'm talking to fucking aliens, bro. You know what I mean? It's like, this is like, oh, I've gone behind the curtain. I've gone to the other side, you know? So to me, I think faith is an important thing because there are certain things that I want to see in my life that haven't yet expressed themselves, and I have faith that they're going to happen. But also faith can be a hindrance. Also, sometimes you need knowing of something. And man, I don't have faith in God or the other side. I don't need it. The same way you don't have faith in the sun shining outside. You know about it, right? You've experienced it. You felt it on your skin. That's how I feel about those things. I've been there. I've seen it.
So now that you've connected, what has shifted in your life? Like, what was the transition like after? How did that affect, you know, your worldview, your actions? You know, was it this, you know, back to baseline, I need to start over? Or was it I'm going to leverage the momentum that I've created so far in my life? What did that look like afterwards?
Yeah, a lot of leveraging momentum that I'd created so far. You know, it showed me this. It gave me this very profound insight, which I mentioned on a couple other podcasts. It said, the most important question you can ever ask is, how can you give your gifts back to the world, right? And if you keep asking that question and meditating on it and acting on it, everything else will take care of itself. So I realized, you know, I had a few gifts. One of them was teaching jiu-jitsu. One of them was, you know, I could write reasonably well. I could communicate reasonably well. So I just let that guide everything I did from that point forwards. I would just focus on identifying my gifts, nurturing them, and also sharing them in any way I could, whether through, you know, a product I created or through just helping someone or just giving them back to the world. And you know, that's actually kind of what led me to my new career as a mentor and a coach. Is I realized that, you know, I'm great at teaching jiu-jitsu and it is a gift, but I have other gifts and there's other things I want to share, you know, and I guess it all started back then, that direction. Even though I only shifted in the last couple of years, the course was kind of charted back then, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So when you started to look at this new course, did you feel like an extreme amount of confidence in moving forward to where, because, you know, a lot of people, they're afraid of judgment and being labeled or making mistakes, fear of failure, or even fear of success. Do you feel like that transformation experience helped you kind of overcome that? Or did you just push through those obstacles?
Yeah, the fear of judgment, I mean, it was exposed really quickly because I came back to London after that experience. I was doing this podcast called London Real at the time, and we did an episode about my ayahuasca experience, and I was still, you know, I mean, I'd been in the jungle, not really eating very much, drinking this strong hallucinogenic for fucking 12 days. I still wasn't quite back down to earth, you know, I still wasn't quite level. And, you know, so I told the story of what happened to me and seeing aliens and fucking all this weird shit. And a lot of people thought I'd lost my mind, right? Like a lot of people thought this dude's gone over the edge. And a lot of people judge me. A lot of people still do judge me for speaking about ayahuasca and for the way I choose to live my life. But man, that's the nature of the game, right? Like, it's not easy, and I'm not always confident about, I still get worried about people, caring about, people judging what I put out there, but I care less and less. Sometimes it still hurts, but I have these kind of master thoughts that help me get over it. One of them is, I used to worry about about others' opinions until I try to pay my rent with them. That always sticks with me whenever I start worrying about what people think of my stuff. And then I also realized that the good people, or the people that not everyone's going to like you, but the people that are operating at the same level as me, and I'm not saying that level is in higher or lower. I just mean the people who are kind of vibrating at the same frequency as me, they will accept my stuff and they will like it. And those who won't, and that's fine. Like, not everyone's supposed to like you. Not if everyone agrees with everything you're doing, you're going to be very weak sauce in the middle of the road, right? Like this, if you want to push the boundaries, some people aren't going to like it. And and I just chose to live my life that way. And yeah, it's not, as I said, it's not always easy, but that is the biggest, I think, for those listening, that's the biggest limiting belief, or the biggest thing that holds back most men, is the concern of what other people think, right?
Well, I mean,
And I'm not saying
well, it just kind of goes back to almost like that tribal mentality, of like, you need to be accepted within the group for survival. And of course, now with social proof and social media influences and this perceived reality that we're all trying to, be, it definitely, I would agree that, number one thing that chokes people is their concern of judgment of others, acceptance.
And what I've realized is, when I put content out there that's been created or influenced by my concern about what other people think, that content is never well received. That's the strangest thing, right? When I put it out there, just when it's coming from within me and I don't give a fuck, that's when people enjoy it and respect it and appreciate it. And it's one of those strange quirks of the human experience, I guess.
Well, it goes back to authenticity. I mean, it's just like, most communication is nonverbal. Everybody's kind of familiar with the stats of like, oh, the nonverbal cues, body language. But like, here's an example I've used before. Like, when you're walking into one of these large stores that have the sliding doors, you will be on your phone, somebody else is not paying attention, and 20 feet away, you guys will start adjusting just ever so slightly because you're on the same path. And yet you're so far away, you didn't make eye contact, just these little nuance adjustments. So there's a level of communication and sensory amongst humans that are at a very, very high level. And so
That's
for
a great
you
example.
to kind of discuss, when you are expounding on your thoughts and perspectives, people can feel these probably immeasurable cues that measure a degree of authenticity. And that's what people connect with. Because like you said, there's people that disagree or aren't your fans. I think there's three categories. There's people that are with you that are like, yes, you're correct, I believe in what you're saying, and we connect on that level. Then you have like the haters division, or the antithesis of it, of people that are like, oh, you're not this, you're not that, the critics. But then you have a third group of people that have the mutual
Just
respect.
doesn't care.
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
right. Okay.
I guess there could be apathy, but a degree of mutual respect, which could be considered apathy, of like, oh, that's what you think and believe, like, makes no difference to me. I may not agree, but I'm not the antithesis of it. And I appreciate what you're trying to do because it is authentic, like, this is coming from your belief and your perspective on the world. Your intention is trying to help others. You're trying to inspire some good. There's no malice. So, there's people that see and measure that output. And I think that you are correct that it is based on that authenticity of being true to yourself, because
you
it's
can't
usually when
fake
people
that.
don't want to leverage.
And you can't fake that authenticity. I mean, there's someone out there that I used to work with who, he says all the right things, but everyone always says to me, there's something off about that guy. There's something off about that guy. It's because he's not authentic. He's trying to be something he's not. And you can't fake that shit, dude. You literally cannot fake it. It just doesn't work, because of all the things you've described. Like, people have not only a very powerful subconscious method of analyzing body language and eye contact and posture and everything like that, but also they have an innate sixth sense of when people are lying to them, right? Because if you believe what I believe, which is that we're all connected on some level, it's impossible to lie to someone. You know, even, you know, there's the example I always use is my wife and I, right? When she was my girlfriend, we've always had a very, very strong connection. But I remember I was traveling, I was away from her once, and I started chatting to this girl. I was in Thailand, and this girl started talking to me, and I didn't cheat on my wife or my girlfriend at the time, but I was definitely like tempted, and I was definitely thinking about it, you know? And the weirdest thing is I got a text after my interaction with this girl, a text from my wife saying, "What's going on? I feel weird." Right? What's going on? Something's going on. I feel weird. Say again.
Yeah, there's a word for that, entanglement.
It's exactly what you said. I'm so glad you understand it. And, you know, just as electrons or atoms are entangled on a subatomic level or an atomic level or quantum level, and if that's what we're made out of is atoms, right, then we obviously are entangled with every other atom, right? It's obvious. So that's why for me it doesn't make sense to fuck people over, or to cheat people, or to lie to people, or be fake, because on some level they know, right? They know, right? And also on some level it's going to come back to you. And yeah, to me that's very important. It's one of the things that I build my life upon.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and like, even when you look at back to jujitsu, because you talked about alignment, man, when you're teaching good technique and you look at like what Roger's able to do, here you are 20 years later, he's still on this whole nother level of jujitsu. Physiologically, if a scientist comes in and measures like his body alignment, pressure alignment, I mean, it is all there with timing, space, you know, anticipation. But then when you go back to like the mental level of it, how many people have been in a high level jiu-jitsu competition tournament and they get beat and it was not by something they haven't seen before? So if it's nothing new, then how did you lose? You know, and if it's somebody that's in your weight class, your experience, you've grappled with better guys, bigger guys, then it goes back to the internal of what are you doing on the inside that is disallowing your performance to be at its peak? And that's just
Sure.
within one little sport with like no downside. When you take that same question out into the real world of being a father, a husband, you know, raising a family, your job, your career, like there's a lot of moving parts and pieces that I think people can see because it's illustrated by a martial art that they like and enjoy. It's like, man, do you think that Roger is actually in the best shape of his life now compared to when he was 22? You know, like physiologically, he's older. He may not, you know, fast twitch muscle fibers may not be as fast, but he has these other skills that are magnified, as a lot of jiu-jitsu guys do, you know, that these other skills magnify. So if you were going to look at a mental skill that would help people magnify their efforts to perform better on the mat, off the mat, what do you feel like a couple of those skills would be?
Oh, what an excellent question, Caleb. So I think the primary one is the ability to focus your awareness on a single point for extended periods of time, which is the function of meditation, right? Or at least the vehicle that meditation uses to get you to altered states. Because most of us, myself included, our awareness is so scattered, right? It's so like scattered on all these many different distractions and things that are vying for our attention. And one of the best exercises to do to very quickly see that I'm not bullshitting you with this is, you know, sit with your eyes closed and concentrate on the sound, the sensation of your breathing entering and exiting your nostrils, and see how long you can concentrate on that before you're distracted by a thought of something else. If you make it to 5 breaths, I'll be impressed, right? You're already like beyond the average person. If you make it to 10 breaths, wow, okay. If you make it like 5 minutes doing that, you're a fucking Buddhist monk, right? It's extremely, extremely difficult. But that is the key to high performance or to excel in anything. That's the key to entering into a flow state, is that ability to concentrate on a single point of or a single object, right? And yeah, I think that's something
that's probably one of the better definitions I've heard of the flow state, you know, the zone. That is probably the best articulated version I've heard about that, because most people are like, you get in the zone because you're doing this activity, you're doing this function, you feel this way, but to properly define it of that, you know, long-term focus without distraction, like that is an excellent, you know, articulation of it. But secondary, you just gave us a measurable skill to where we can kind of go. It's kind of like, you know, how high can you jump? I mean, you just gave us the measuring stick of how many breaths can you take. So during that distraction, my assumption is that you're probably talking about internal dialogue, you know, shift of focus. So
Mm-hmm.
where do you feel that internal dialogue can sabotage people versus empower them?
I mean, it's everything, right? Like your language is the operating system that your mind uses to runs on, right? So, I mean, the example I'm so fond of using is from Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink, right? And this changed my life when I read this. So, uh, I'm probably going to be I'm definitely paraphrasing, and I might be getting it slightly wrong, but you'll get the message, I'm sure. So in Blink, he references the study whereby they took two control groups, right? And they were getting the control groups to move between two rooms in a building and timing how long it took them to move between these two rooms, right? And when they were in the first room, before they left for their trip to the second room, they'd get them to read this sheet of paper that had embedded within it certain instructions or certain words. So the first control group had a sheet that had a story or this stuff that was written, and embedded within it were certain words relating to moving slowly, right? So just a certain adjective here and there, like you wouldn't know what it was about, but there would be these things embedded. And then the second group had this thing embedded in it, words embedded in their page, which was otherwise identical, pertaining to speed or moving at a faster pace. And then they measured how long it took each group to walk between these two rooms, and they found that the one group, the first one, took on average, I don't know, 5 seconds slower, and the other one took on average 5 seconds faster, right? Now, that just shows you the power of words and the power of language, right? And your thoughts, generally, I mean, I know mine are usually framed within language. So to me, if it's that powerful, if just reading a single word can unconsciously make the difference between how I move through the world, then I want to be reading the best fucking words possible, the ones most conducive to performance and health and happiness and wisdom. And I mean, that's one of the reasons I think affirmations are so powerful, is because reading them and saying them is priming your subconscious to look for those things and operate in alignment with those things. So if you have a guy who has negative self-talk and is saying to himself every day something like, I'm no good, or I'll never be a black belt, or I'm always going to be broke, or women are evil, or whatever it might be, then that's going to obviously affect the nature of his experience. Obviously, I mean, if we extrapolate out from that experiment that Gladwell references in Blink. So to answer your question, I think, yeah, your self-talk, the language that you're using, plays a massive role in your experience as you move through the world. And neurolinguistic programming is a whole field of study dedicated to how to use language effectively to improve the quality of your life. So I'm a 100% believer in that.
So if you were going to give somebody some short advice, you know, one was affirmations, you know, two is beware of what you're reading, which nowadays most people don't read, most people listen. So if you were going to give somebody a couple of ideas of like, here's something to discipline yourself, because you gave us the focus with the meditation. If you're going to give some tools of specifically do this to start getting your self-talk under control, because there's a lot of people that they really do believe and feel wholeheartedly they have no influence over that internal dialogue. I mean, they are the leaf floating down the river that just, I'm just along for the ride. And people gaining that control, or at least that awareness. If we can create distance between stimulus and response, that's where people find awareness, which I think, going back to like your experience, you know, in Peru, is that experience almost gives you that observer perspective to where you can see your actions and views from the outside. So if you were going to give something short and quick that could assist people to control their internal dialogue, what would it be?
Yeah, what a fantastic question. There's a few things. The first is just to realize that you are not your mind, right? Your mind is a tool. And so the first thing is slowing down that mind, or creating a detachment between your thoughts and who you really are, right? And the only way I've really found to do that is through things like meditation. And you know, you can't really start playing around with these beliefs and these thoughts that are going through your mind until you recognize that you are in control of them. and that they're something that is there to serve you, right? Most people aren't even, so get this blew my mind when I found this out. We have on average 60,000 thoughts a day, right? Just think about that, 60,000 thoughts a day. How many of those are unconscious, or how many of those are you separated from, or you actually looking at? For most people, it's zero. Most people are just lost in the mind. It's just the mind takes them wherever it wants to go. So until you create that space, as you spoke about, which is between the stimulus and the response, or between the mind and the observer, you can't really do anything, right? You first have to create that space. And the way to do it is through meditation. I really believe that. Then the second thing I would say, there's books that can help you with this. One of the ones that I got a lot out of over the past year is called The Mind Made Prison by Matteo Tabai. That book really also helped me a lot to realize that a lot of my beliefs and thoughts are just arbitrary, and there's no real reason that I've adopted them, right? And that also allows you to separate them. Like some people, for example, believe they'll only be happy when they have money, right? And I know that was actually a belief of mine for a long time. But then the guy in this book, he's like, why do you believe that? And you start working back, and then you realize it's usually, most of our beliefs are usually based on a trauma or an inaccuracy or something that happened to us when we were younger, and they've got no basis in reality, and they are very often don't serve us. So I think for anyone listening, the first thing, as I said, is to understand that you are not your thoughts, and try to create some space between yourself and them. And then before you even try to change them, just start to fucking analyze them. Start to figure out why you think the things you do. And then you can choose, do they serve you or do they not? And if they do, keep them. If they don't, start eliminating them or replacing them with something else.
It's kind of like you have to understand the difference between correlation and causation, is especially when our brains are being shaped at a young age. Like you said, something traumatic happens, or you create a belief of what something means. And just because that belief came up at a certain time with certain circumstance, we think, oh, that's causation. Money equals this because of this circumstance when I was a kid, versus just, the correlation of, well, they just happen to happen at the same time. And when you look at our brain, I usually call it like the reptilian brain function, whenever the gland in my neck swells up and I stop thinking cognitive when I get frustrated or angry. When you look at the reptilian brain, it's meant for a little bit of survival. So if I get sick and I ate chicken, therefore, chicken made me sick, and I can have that belief for the rest of my life. Because that's the example I always give people. I'm like, think back to a food or a beverage that you ate or you drank that made you so sick that you can't eat today. And I asked them, I'm like, logically, does that make sense? And of course they always say no. But I say, but emotionally, you can't eat it. You can't smell it. Why? Because, and I feel like that's exactly what you're asking people to do, is they got to find a way to evaluate it. But now when you go to the next step, breaking the limited belief, breaking a perspective that doesn't serve you, how can they do that? What's some steps they can take to be like, you know what, my view of money and happiness, relationships fulfilling me, being the champion will change my life. How can you change those beliefs that maybe you're not exactly factual?
Yeah, well, first one is awareness. The second one, I guess, is just rationalization. Like, just ask yourself, okay, so let's say your belief is money will make me happy. Just then start asking questions around that. Like, does everyone who has money, are they all happy? Right? Do you know any poor people that are happy? Right? And then you start to see that because it helps your mind enjoys logic, right? And when you show logically that some of those beliefs aren't true, it helps them to fall away. But also then if we look at things like neuroplasticity and rewiring the brain, those things there's different ways to do it. One of the most powerful ways to do it is through plant medicine, through psilocybin and ayahuasca and things like that. It's been shown that those things break the connections, because that's all a thought really is, or a memory really is, or a belief really is it's literally a synaptic connection between neurons in your brain, or a cluster of neurons in your brain. And there's a couple of ways to change that, right? The first is just cognitive behavioral therapy, which is just changing the way you think. And a simple way to do that is you can put on like an elastic band, and every time you have the thought that you're trying to change, you snap the band so that you have a physiological response, and then you change the thought in your mind. And eventually those neurons, there's an expression by Joe Dispenza, neurons that fire together wire together, right? So when you stop firing together firing them together, by stopping those thoughts, eventually that connection gets broken or it becomes weaker, right? And then you replace it with something else. So you can do it that way, which I think you have to do. But also, I mean, if you want the fast track solution, take something like ayahuasca or psilocybin, and it's been shown that those create chemicals within your brain, neurotransmitters and receptors and every, I mean, I'm not a neuroscientist, so I don't know the exact science of it, but those actually very quickly speed up that separation of old patterns and the formation of new ones. So I think those two strategies in tandem form the recipe for very powerful change.
That's an interesting perspective, because I mean, it's no different than, like, if you go back to the jiu-jitsu world, whenever I always grab a grip thumb up, and then I now need to grab it thumb down. You know, how many hundreds of hours in training does it take for me to change a response? Because think about it, if I'm white belt in jiu-jitsu and coach comes over and says, hey, instead of thumb up, we're going to go thumb down, you know, fairly easy transition. If I come to you right now and I'm like, hey, Nick, I need you to start going thumb down with this lapel grip, that's going to take a minute.
Untrain. Yeah, you got to untrain.
It's going to take a minute. And so when people are looking at some of these beliefs in their lives and some of these perspectives that have been with them for their entire life, it has been reinforced for 20, 30, 40, 50, sometimes 70 years. They have to understand that there's going to be a degree of untraining, you know, to go about things differently for a new approach. And, you know, they always say old dogs, new tricks. That's difficult. So, you know,
it's difficult, but it's not impossible. I mean, the science is showing that the brain is a lot more adaptable well into adulthood and old age than previously thought. And the term is neuroplasticity. And if anyone wants to find out more about this, I highly recommend the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza. In particular, his book, Becoming Supernatural. And there's another one called Changing the Habit of Being Yourself. I mean, just think about the title. Just think about that for a second. Changing the habit of being yourself, because that's all you are. It's a collection of habits and thought patterns, right? And if you want to change, you've got to change those, right? And it's a multi-pronged approach. For me, meditation, being fully aware of my thoughts and actively striving to you know, make sure they're the ones I want as opposed to the ones I don't want. And then using things like plant medicine, that's been the recipe that's helped me. And man, I'm still learning, you know, I'm still, I would say, you know, maybe purple belt in this, you know, I want to be a red belt, but it's a lifelong process of constantly being aware that you are not your thoughts.
It's just being the forever student.
For sure. Beginner's mind, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you look back, my last question would be, if you had to pick one of the most impactful lessons that you've taken from training with Roger, because I mean, he's one of the greatest in the world in jiu-jitsu world. And I think that some of that, you know, transcends off the mats. If you're going to look at one of the greatest lessons that you've taken from that experience, what would it be?
From that whole experience,
it's tough.
There's a few. The first was to trust my instincts. You know, I was at a point, I wasn't really making it work in London from a financial perspective. I'd got a job in a company and I didn't like it. And things weren't coming together. And then I was gonna go home. I was gonna go back to South Africa. And my instinct just said to me, like, you know, no, it's not time to go. It's not time to go. And also when I was choosing where to go train, I actually went to another academy just before Rogers, and I didn't get a good vibe there. I was just like, nah, I don't dig these dudes. It's just not a good vibe, you know? And my instinct said, no, go train. And it didn't make sense because Roger's place was further away than where I lived. But, you know, I just trusted my instinct. You know, I trusted there was something for me in jiu-jitsu back then. And I trusted that I needed to be there at that time. And, you know, for me, I always speak about there's a little voice. There's a loud voice, which is the chattering monkey mind, right? That's just talking shit to you all the time and commentating. And, you know, usually it's usually, or very often it's kind of negative. And then there's the softer, gentler voice, which is very difficult to hear. And the only way to hear it is when you become quiet, right? And every now and then you'll hear something from that little voice. You'll hear a little instruction, you know, or a little suggestion. And I found that when I listen to that voice, things are always beyond my wildest dreams, right? Things work out exactly the way I want, even better than I wanted them to work out. But if I don't, it usually slaps me on the ass, right? Pretty badly. And so to me, learn to listen. I would suggest anyone if they want to take some wisdom from this conversation, would be learn to listen for that voice and trust it, trust your instincts, and they won't lead you wrong.
Excellent. Man, I really appreciate the time. That was a lot of great insight that I really think people are going to have some self-reflection over, and just kind of taking some of those experiences from martial arts and transcending it into regular life, but just keeping that mindset of, you know, the forever student, the beginner's mind, as you mentioned. Is there anything you'd like to finish with today?
Sure. I mean, I just guess if people want to know more about my work, if they enjoyed this conversation, if they learned something, just head on over to my site, which is liberationmentor.com. And I've also got a podcast, which is growing quite quickly. And yeah, just get in touch if you want to speak to me. I'm pretty open to connecting with people.
Definitely. And I appreciate all the help that you've given me. And I've really enjoyed the relationship over the last few months and getting to know you and seeing your work and kind of what you're focusing on. It's really been a good time. And so I'm just really thankful that you took some time to talk to us today. And I will definitely be in touch. Thank you.
Thanks, Caleb.